And is there any evidence as to the size of the black economy? I mean, this store of wealth, I mean, how much of that store of wealth would be, from the task force's view, black market activity?
I think it's probably better you ask Treasury and or the task force.
Oh, you
itself.
raised the task force, so I thought you might have had some view on that. I'd pay $11,000 in cash now and it's completely legal. No problem. After the enactment of this bill, that will have to be, if it's to an ABN holder, that'll have to be done electronically or it will be illegal. Is that right?
That's my understanding, Senator.
Okay, so how many more transactions are you going to see? Has anybody done the snapshot of that?
That would be a question I would have to take on notice, Senator.
Well, perhaps if you could, because if you do 2.6 million, we want to know what is the size of this problem you're trying to solve.
In terms of the size of the problem, I think that's a question best directed to Treasury.
But you're going to count.
But in some respects, you know, we're trying to deal with the black economy, which inherently, I presume, means collection of greater taxes for consolidated revenue. Or is the purpose of the bill, in your view, to basically make life more difficult for people who are, you know, attempting to money launder or so forth? Or is the purpose to gain additional revenue?
Well, I defer to my Treasury colleagues about the purpose for the bill, Senator.
The black economy was basically, and a lot of the recommendations from that came from evidence from which Michael Andrew and his secretariat found while going and speaking to the communities, business organisations and other public sector agencies. And what that found was that there was a growing frustration from businesses that other businesses were using cash discounts to cut them out. So it was a competition issue. So for Michael, it was a fairness issue.
I just want to go to this business of competition. So you are saying that there have been submissions to the task force from employers saying that people using cash were undercutting them. I mean, do we know how many submissions? Do we know the level of that, or is it?
So the task force did community halls, community meetings, and that's where a majority of these came from.
So there's no sort of statistical data, it's anecdotal, is it?
It is anecdotal.
When you tell me you do a couple of town halls and people complain about cash payments, I can understand that, but I don't think that's empirical evidence.
I think it is, because
Well,
it's advice from one
How many
business
people
what they've
told you
seen
that?
in an environment which they're
How many
competing
people
in.
told you? 10?
Well, it's a task force. I can't tell you. It's a
12?
task force before my
So
time.
we're looking for some data.
Remember, this idea of pushing this cash ban bill has been mandated pretty much by the IMF, International Monetary Fund, and that is in order to be able to make sure that when we do go to negative interest rates, which is what everyone's talking about, that cash cannot be used as an alternative. If you've got cash, people are going to pull their cash out of the bank because they don't want to keep it in the bank and pay the bank for the privilege of having their money in there. They'll use cash. So the cash has to be restricted by IMF dictates, and that's exactly what the Bankers Party of the Morrison government's doing.
There has been a lot of concern within the community about the impact of this bill. There wouldn't be a member in this House who hasn't received representations from constituents.
Look, I'll start by acknowledging that I've been approached by quite a lot of people in the community, not just constituents, but in fact from right around Australia, who have expressed a broad range of concerns with this bill. So much so that I won't be supporting it. The sorts of concerns that have been raised by constituents, everything from concern that it's designed to push people into the clutches of the banks, so they have to engage in the banking system, concerns that it's a fundamental right, sorry, it's an attack on people's fundamental right to use cash. Also an interesting line of argument, which I think has some merit, that if Australia does eventually reach negative interest rates, cash will assume a new importance, but this bill would diminish the ability of people to use cash.
This bill stops everyday Australians from tendering more than $10,000 in cash in a transaction. It forces people to put their money in a bank. It forces people to put their money in a bank. only to see some of that money taken in bank fees and negative interest rate deductions. For a measure that the government says is highly unlikely, the government seems to be putting all the necessary steps and preparations in place. In a nutshell, the RBA Governor's solution to the biggest debt bubble in Australian history is more money printing, more government intervention in financial markets, and ultimately more debt.
Just last week, in response to the remarkable video evidence of money laundering at Crown Casino and other evidence that I released last week from a driver who was picking up these people from these black flights at Tullamarine private jet base, I sought to move a motion in this place to establish a Royal Commission. What happened? Voted down again. What does the government and what does the opposition have to hide, Deputy Speaker? Because if they've got nothing to hide, they would have no objection to a parliamentary inquiry. They'd have no objection to a Royal Commission. And a Royal Commission it needs to be. It's no good having this unnecessary bill today where we're going to make cash transactions over $10,000 illegal. There's no point doing things like that when we have much bigger and much deeper problems. What's going on here? If you've got nothing to hide, you should have supported the parliamentary inquiry and you should have supported the move for a Royal Commission. Deputy Speaker, I'm talking a lot about Crown Casino here to do with this cash bill, but I think it's the best example I can find to illustrate the fact that the problem in this country is not a lack of regulation when it comes to misconduct and money laundering in particular. It's the fact that our politicians are not doing their job. Our enforcement agencies are not doing their job. Our regulatory bodies are not doing their job. If we want to do something to improve this country and crack down on money laundering, then what we should be doing is having a proper inquiry into what's going on and make these agencies do their job.
So, Senator, I think a good place to start would be with your party's position vis-à-vis this particular bill, which of course is currently a draft at the moment. Would be interested in your perspective and specifically what position you have taken.
Okay, we're opposed to the legislation. We won't be supporting it. We will not be supporting it. Cash is a valid currency exchange, and we're fine with cash.
So one of the things, of course, the bill is trying to attack is the so-called black economy. Mm-hmm. What do you think about the government's position vis-à-vis black economy and this particular strategy for tackling it?
Well, there are already laws in place and recommendations in place. I believe that under terrorism laws, goods, assets can be confiscated, money can be confiscated if it's shown to be used criminally. We don't have much evidence of that actually following through. We understand also that the black economy, the so-called black economy, according to the government, is worth about $50 billion, and yet we already have laws in place that enable the government to strip assets, take assets, forfeit people's assets if they're found to be involved in criminal activities, and only $42 million was taken that way. So that's a long, long way short of $50 billion, and I don't think the government's really serious about this. When people end up with no cash, they have to go through the banks, so you can see who the big winner is.
I won't be supporting this bill. It is entirely unnecessary. It is an unhealthy distraction from the reality, which is that our problems are not an absence of money laundering rules and regulations. The problem in this country is that we have weak governance, politicians who want to hide from the truth and from scrutiny, and just about every agency I can think of that's related to money laundering at the federal level and in Victoria at the state level, they're useless when it comes to money laundering. In fact, by some estimates, less than 1% of money from crime is intercepted in this country. And no wonder when you can have an allegation like money laundering last week and AUSTRAC have not even given me a call and asked for the name of the witnesses.